Hello, I'm Carolyn Herbert from the Finance News Network, and joining me from newly listed pharmaceutical company RAC Oncology is CEO Peter Molloy. Peter, congratulations on the listing.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Peter, could you start by giving us an introduction to RAC Oncology?
So RAC Oncology is a specialty pharmaceutical company in that we look for shelved or overlooked assets that perhaps have got lost in big pharma mergers. We seek to acquire them relatively inexpensively, finish off the development and get them on the market quickly. Very different to, say, a biotech model where you're dealing with a long pathway to market and higher risk. Our first drug asset is called Bisantrene, which is a cancer chemotherapy drug.
So where is Bisantrene used and how does it work?
Byzantium is a chemotherapy drug, and like other chemotherapy drugs, it works by killing cancer cells. In our case, the primary clinical indication for Bisantrene is going to be acute myeloid leukemia, or AML. Now, this is a relatively rare leukemia, a blood cancer, but it's very difficult to treat. And the standard of care for treatment of AML hasn't changed in 30 years. The opportunity for Bisantrene today is the same as it was when it got lost back in the 1980s and 1990s. And the standard of care involves 7 days of chemotherapy, after which, unfortunately, many of the patients relapse and then they have no hope. Bisantrene gives them hope. It was tested in 5 phase 2 studies during the 1980s and 1990s, where even in patients who've been heavily pre-treated with other chemotherapy agents, it produced nearly a 50% response rate. So that's where we see it positioned, and that's where we think it's going to have the greatest value in the short term.
So Peter, how does this compare to other cancer treatments for leukemia?
Well, there really are no other treatments once the standard chemotherapy fails. The new immunotherapies that we're all excited about for many of the cancers don't work in AML. I just went to the ASCO meeting in Chicago where oncologists from around the world discussed treatments for cancer, and it became very clear that AML is probably the most difficult cancer to treat. So there's a clear and long-term opportunity for Bisantrene and AML.
Thanks. So where are you at with the approvals process for the drug?
Our plan is to file an investigational new drug application, or IND, in the US with the FDA, and then start a couple of clinical studies that hopefully will get us to FDA approval for general marketing of Bisantrene for AML and potentially other cancers. Now, that's going to take a few years. In parallel, and in the meantime, we intend to try to sell the drug under a named patient program in Europe, which is essentially a compassionate use program where you make the drug available to AML sufferers who have no other option. And that's exactly where Bisantrene fits in. And we can make early sales under that by charging patients, or in many cases it'll be reimbursed by the local health authorities for the drug, even though it's not yet approved in the US.
So Peter, what is the potential market size and how many people are diagnosed with this type of leukemia each year?
The potential market in the named patient program is probably $30 to $40 million a year in sales, I think is what we could expect reasonably from that. In the longer term, with a full FDA approval, it could be 10 times that amount. So that's the market potential. It is a relatively small disease. The incidence of AML is about 1/20th of, say, breast cancer or lung cancer, but even so, it can still be very valuable for a small company like RAC Oncology.
And Peter, now to your IPO, how much was raised and at what price did you start trading?
Our target raising was 3.3 million. We actually raised 4.3, so I was very happy with the pre-listing demand, and we started trading at 20 cents.
Very good. And what value does this place on the company?
At 20 cents, the company's worth 10.5 million, which represents an enterprise value of about 6 million. So there's a lot of upside given the embedded value in this drug asset.
And finally, Peter, where would you like to see the company 12 months from now?
Our goal over the next 12 months is to complete the IND process and get the IND filed with the FDA and position ourselves next year to start the ongoing clinical program in the US and in parallel to initiate the named patient program in Europe so we can start generating sales before the end of the second year.
Peter Molloy, congratulations on the listing and thanks for the introduction to RAC Oncology.
Thank you, Carolyn.